All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Ali Garrett, and I am the CX Director at Isentia. You can probably already see that I've got a couple of guests with me today, and I'm going to introduce them in just a second because we've got some really cool folks here to talk to you. But a little bit of housekeeping just at the top of the session. We have muted everybody's microphones today. So thank you so much for joining us. I feel really lucky that the Thursday before a long weekend, you're giving us half an hour of your time, but we have muted mics just to keep things as minimal background noise as possible. If you do hear background noise, it'll be one of us panelists. We had a crow and a cat in the background just as we were getting ready before. But that doesn't mean we don't want to hear any questions from you. We would love questions. We've got some gurus in the session today, and I've got time on the agenda for you to be able to ask them questions and for us all to be able to have a coffee or have a glass of wine, because there are some people dialing in from New Zealand, including Ngaire. So let's get started, and let me introduce you to our panelists, to our gurus. So we've got Rochelle Courtenay here with us today, and Rochelle is the founder and the managing director of Share the Dignity. And if you haven't heard of Share the Dignity before, then I know Rochelle is going to tell you a lot about the amazing work that they do, but Rochelle works with over 6,000 volunteers across Australia, working to end period poverty for women and girls who are doing it tough. So they could be women who are experiencing domestic violence, experiencing homelessness, and Rochelle and her amazing team work on multiple initiatives, and it's all about giving dignity back to those women and girls who might be having a tough time and just need to grab that dignity back for them to get on their feet. So Rochelle's going to talk to us today, and she's going to share how she's got all of those volunteers. She's not going to be able to meet every single one of them face to face. So what strategies does she use to be able to motivate them, connect with them, and share the work that they're doing? And for anyone who tuned in last week, you'll remember Ngaire. So Ngaire Crawford is our Insights Director for Australia and New Zealand here at Isentia. So that means she heads up and runs our media research division. And this is the bit where I always have to look at my notes. Ngaire is also the chair of the Global Young Leaders Group for AMEC, which is the International Association for the Measurement and Education of Communication. And so another way of saying that could be that Ngaire is a major nerd for communication and measuring it and tracking it. And so Ngaire is going to spend some time with us today in this webinar. And actually, let me go to my slides. I got too excited looking at everybody's faces that I wasn't moving them along. So you'll know that Ngaire is going to spend some time talking to us today about trends in traditional and social media, and what we're seeing there around this truly unique time in our lives. So we're running these webinars to focus on communicating through change. It's a time of massive change, upheaval. I feel like things change every day. And what that's also brought about is if people are spending more time at home, is home a safe place for everybody? So I'm going to hand over to Ngaire, who's going to share a little bit about what she has been learning and researching over the last week.
Cool. Hi, everyone. As Ali mentioned, I'm Ngaire, the Insights Director here at Isentia, and I'm really excited that I seem to have fallen into this fun little tradition of getting to support our great guests every week with a little bit of data and the opportunity to share a little bit of knowledge and about something I'm very passionate about, which is very good communication. For those of you that tuned in last week, I was encouraging people to consider their own biases and the information that they're consuming, and to listen a little bit more broadly than you usually would, given the context that we're in. And this week, I want to take a look at an issue that I know I've tried to be quite conscious of while we're in a lockdown. I think for those of you that are joining from New Zealand, I can't remember what day of lockdown we are in. I think we're over halfway now. But obviously there's a lot of interesting conversations and a lot of memes about working from home, some of which I did share last week, which is fun. But yeah, home isn't always the safest place for everyone, and it is a very contextually complex and kind of rich piece of information to look at. And what I wanted to have a quick look at was the idea of how it's communicating on mainstream media, and then what the difference is in social media. Social media gets a really interesting, usually negative rap in these types of situations. So I want to spend a little bit of time looking at a little bit of the good in social today. So on mainstream, the main things that you see being reported on at the moment is around the increase in family violence. This has been a topic for a while. One of the things that I think is actually really great is that it has been a topic right from the outset. So it has had attention.
So Ngaire, I'm just going to pause you for a second because I've got our tech guru Dan who's saying some people are still waiting to see my screen. So bear with me, and if you are able to hear me, if you can let me know in the chat area just by saying a yes, I can hear you, everything sounds great. We have had a couple of reports from people saying that they're not able to see our smiling faces and not able to be able to tune in. I know that we've got our guru Dan, who is in the chat area, who'll be available to answer any of your questions. I know there can be a little bit of a delay, but if you can just let me know if you can see anything, that would be awesome. And I will try. So Beverly has said all good. Melissa, all good for me. Okay, fantastic. Pat can hear me. Did you guys miss anything? Because I'm just wondering if some people have missed the intro. Do I need to go back and do that really quickly? Fantastic. I just had a little flicker of worry that Ngaire and Rochelle were going to be sharing such great stories and nobody was going to be able to see or hear those. Can see and hear okay? Fantastic. Thank you. And all the slides. That is excellent to hear. All right. Tech housekeeping over. We started this webinar series because we're communicating and working in different ways, and it looks like even we aren't able to escape the curse of the conch call. I think we've probably hit some of those squares on that conference call bingo you see going around. Has everybody told somebody to mute their mic? Can we see someone saying, can you hear me? Have you got the slides on screen? All right, fantastic. Thank you for letting me know. That is just gorgeous. What I'm going to do now is hand back to Ngaire. And if you missed any of the intro for Ngaire, Ngaire is our Insights Director for Australia and New Zealand, and she is talking about some of the trends that we've seen on traditional and social. So sorry to interrupt you, Ngaire. Take it away.
Cool. So the mainstream media is very much talking about the increase in family violence, which has been right from the outset. So I know that especially in both New Zealand and Australia, it was always a conscious topic that was being discussed as soon as lockdowns were being discussed. One that's particularly prevalent in New Zealand at the moment is around connectivity and education. The school term starts back next week, and there's a lot of concern around people not necessarily being able to access the right equipment or having a decent internet connection for homeschooling. And generally also this topic of poverty during lockdown. When you are at home, when you're in a complex and ever-changing economic context at the moment, and things like even in New Zealand lockdown, access to food is tightly reined by supermarkets. Specials aren't necessarily a thing. It's a very difficult time to want to buy fresh food. In terms of what people are actually searching for online, one of the things I find really interesting about Australia and New Zealand particularly is that everyone's searching about the rules. They want to know about what the rules are for lockdown. They want to know about policy. They want to know about whether or not they're doing the right thing. That's largely what they're asking Google for at the moment. But on social media, one of the things I really want to be able to highlight today is that people are using their social media channels to reach out, and they're using these social channels to create connection and to remind people to check in on people. For context, these two cluster charts, and they are my favorite chart at the moment, so if you regularly tune into these, you may see a lot of them. These are the topics associated with people discussing being unsafe, that's the top one, and scared, which is the bottom one. So as you can see, they're incredibly driven by COVID-19 and all of the associated topics with that. Also, references to being scared or unsafe have more than doubled since from between February to March, to give you an idea. So if you want to flick to the next slide, Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
So while this context is quite heavy, I don't really want to end this week without a little bit of kind of hope and positivity. And I really want to highlight some of these positive aspects of social media during this time. Um, Social media is absolutely not without its complexities. But at the moment, a lot of attention is paid to things like bots, conspiracy theories, and misinformation. And there are some really wonderful aspects to what's happening in social media right now. So these examples that I've got here, you can see the Insta Stories screenshot there that's on the left. This is a really lovely code word that people have developed online and was shared around Instagram and Twitter for people that felt unsafe and how they would be able to communicate that on social media in a way that didn't necessarily trigger any kind of surveillance or would get suspicions from other people in their household. So this was the idea that you would ask about makeup. For someone it was eyeliner, for someone it was any other type of makeup, and people offering to send them makeup as a way of getting their address so that they could pass it on to police or any other kind of organisation that would be able to help them. So as well as building that social connection, social media is also a wonderful way to call out behaviour that isn't ideal. So on the right, what you can see is an example of communication actually from the Malaysian government. So it was actually the Ministry for Women in Malaysia. My wonderful colleagues in Southeast Asia were sharing this story with me, and I really wanted to share it with all of you. So this communication is about how women should behave during lockdown. It roughly translates to women should not nag their husbands, and that they should ideally have the voice of Doraemon when speaking to their husbands. For any of you that aren't familiar with Doraemon, that is like a weird blue Japanese cartoon cat. And there were also other communication, other pieces of communication that were indicating that women had to ensure that they were still getting dressed and wearing makeup at home so that they did not cause any adverse effects in their family life. So there is this kind of beautiful call out culture that can sometimes get out of control on social media, but ultimately in this context, absolutely the right thing to do. The idea of Doraemon oppressing women became a very popular meme in response to this communication, which was ultimately removed from the Ministry for Women's Social Assets and website based on the public outcry. So obviously common sense rules do still apply with social media. You do need to check your sources and investigate further, but there is this kind of added benefit to it. If you want to flick to the next slide, Ali. So just in my kind of final wrap up to all of you while I have you, I think the importance of community and communicating with your communities is really valuable in a time like this. Those online communities are so valuable. I would encourage you to see the good in them and see the innovation. The way that people are connecting with each other, the way that businesses are connecting with their customers is incredibly interesting and innovative right now. Social media communities might call you out really quickly, but they can also spread good messages and ideas for you just as fast. Listen to them, ask for feedback. We're all in our homes. Everything is very conversational right now. It's a great time to connect and talk and put ideas out there for feedback. Don't assume it's your whole audience, but at the same time, you probably have a more willing participant list than you ordinarily would. And if any of you have ever heard me speak about communications or leadership in any context, I'm constantly on about being genuine and authentic. It's so important on social because it's so easy to see through. If you're not being genuine, if you're not being authentic, you'll get called out very, very quickly. But at the same time, if you look like you're trying to do the right thing, most of the time people are on board. So know your audience and your context. My only suggestions this week are really, I'd have a look at following those businesses that are really affected by lockdown. For those of you that are tuning in from Australia, there The restrictions on lockdown in New Zealand are incredibly intense, and most businesses can't operate. Most retail businesses, small businesses aren't able to operate. How some of those businesses are behaving online is incredibly interesting. How you work on your community creation, how you work on your content plans, how you continue to support your community by work that you might be doing for essential services, is really beneficial to kind of longer term community creation and brand building. So look at those other businesses and what they're doing. Also, watch for cancel culture. It's incredibly interesting to see what's driving people to call out brands and public figures. One of the easiest ways to do this is to just check what's trending worldwide on Twitter. Usually there'll be a so-and-so is over party, or there'll be a cancel someone, and have a look at what it is that's driving those people to respond that way, because it's only ever going to help in how you want to communicate with your audiences going forward. And that's me for this week, but I'll just pass over to Rochelle now.
Thank you, Ngaire. Well, for everybody, I am Rochelle, otherwise known as the Pad Lady, a title I absolutely love and have been wearing it for about 5 years. When I read an article back in 2015 that talked about how many homeless women there were in Australia and how they didn't have access to the very basic of essentials like sanitary items. So at Share the Dignity, we do 2 collections just for sanitary items a year in March and in August. And we also do a big campaign at Christmas time called It's in the Bag. And that's where we ask everyday Australians to fill a bag with all life's essentials like sanitary items, shampoo, conditioner, toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, and soap. They're the very basics of things that we believe every person has the right to. But for a woman who's fleeing domestic violence, it may be 2 weeks since she's brushed her teeth. So those very basic of essentials are really important. Never, ever, at the very beginning, did I ever think that I would have these amazing people called Shiros and Heroes who make this magic happen all over Australia. So for us, I have had to communicate via the internet for 5 years. So I feel like this is not different for me. I mean, it's different for me from the fact that I get such a big vibe and such an energy from other people. And I know that's probably one of my biggest strengths as a leader is to pass that energy on to other people. And that's something I think it's not 100% like it is face to face, but you can do that through communicating online. And we use Workplace, which is like Facebook, but it's an intranet. So we have, I think we actually have 5,783 volunteers that we communicate to. So we communicate in announcements. We break that down into different states and teams. But to give you an example of our announcements, even through this crisis point, the most important thing was what Ngaire was saying was authenticity. And it was everything that I lead from comes from the heart. So it is always about the why for us. And I think, you know, as a business and unfortunately, a charity is a business. If we don't run it like a business, then we will not be around for a long time. So in order to look after our most prized possession, which are our Shiros, then we have to communicate to them and to make sure that they are always at the forefront of everything that we do. So when collection boxes go out in all of the Woolworths and MPs' offices and hairdressing salons all over Australia, those Shiros are the people who put those boxes there, pick up the product, get them off to count them, bag them, enter them, and get them out to the charities that we work with. So without them, our charity actually wouldn't even exist. So communicating to them, making sure that when we communicate, we are communicating from our heart and not our heart first and our head second. So, and while the message has always got to be clarity on the work that they do, you have to appeal to our volunteers or even to our staff on why they're doing it in the first place. So making sure that you're always sandwiching the message that you want to get out there and making it very clear. I do a lot of videos, so it wouldn't be unusual for me to record a video and also have the wording there as well on most of our communication, based on the fact that there are certain people like me who would like to walk and listen to the video or watch the video, and then there are other people who want it all in dot points. So we try to communicate in different ways for different people. But, you know, in this crisis, it's been about communicating every step of the way. For them, even though, like everybody else, we were just making it up as we were going along, and it was constantly evolving, changing. So we were actually in the middle of a collection drive, and we had to tools down. So we had to make a really big decision as crisis management of not letting our sheroes go out and pick up those donations because it wasn't safe to do so. And that was actually even before the government came in and said no one's to go out. And even though Woolworths is an essential place to go, we still didn't want our volunteers touching anything that they didn't need to touch. So yeah, it was quite heartbreaking. And I think that leading with that authenticity and crying, I'm really quite vulnerable with our sheroes, because at the end of the day, if we don't do what we need to do, then we can't help women. So it was heartbreaking, and I know that our volunteers could feel that, and you know, unfortunately, I'm just a person like everybody else, and things will always get you. So you don't always have to be big and brave and strong to show that, you know, you're leading in the right way. So yeah, so different things that we've been doing during this crisis has been, and this is a great example. Today I put a post up and said, hey guys, I'd like to do a Mother's Day campaign externally, and I would love you to share a picture, your favorite picture with your mum. They are just comments and comments, and it's making me smile, it's making everybody smile, it's making women share their pictures of their mother, and then share their story that their mother had passed away, or other stories, and then they're all connecting with each other and talking. So whilst that had it was just keeping them engaged. I do want the photos for something I'm going to do for social media anyway, but it was a really great engagement piece. Last week we did, I think 3 days ago, I just did a really raw video that just said, are you okay? Quite simply, are you okay? I know that I'm struggling, and I'm sure that there's lots of people. There's a part of me that's struggling, and there's a part of me that's going, oh, I have to wear makeup every day. So that was really quite interactive. In that piece, we learnt, you know, we probably had about 500 comments on that, which is quite high, I think, in this. And you know, out of that, we learnt that we have one of our sheroes who was going off for a mastectomy today. So we actually had all of these people come in and go, you know, you've got this, babe, if you need anything, and they don't even know each other. So it was just trying to create community. You know, we had people book swapping all over the place. Yeah, I'll mail you that one, I'll do this. So it was just trying to create the community within our own community, because at the end of the day, I know that our sheroes are the first always to help other people in need, and it's our job within our community right now just to help each other when we can't help other people. So yeah, I think that's probably the key to what we do. I mean, the key to what we do is really the fact that they want to be there. We're not talking about I mean, we have 10 staff as well, and we've just finished a lunchtime. Once a week we do a lunchtime meeting. Got no agenda, we just talk. So we just talk and laugh and try to get that vibe from each other. And then, you know, we're doing like everybody else. There are team meetings going on every day, and it's super productive. With having people work from home, I think it will start a new trend, and it will show employees that there is a way to be able to do it. So yeah, so I'm open for any questions now,
Awesome. I think that sounds lovely. So let's do questions now, either for Ngaire or Rochelle, or a bit of an open season. The best place to ask those questions is in the chat area. So where all of you gorgeous people told me that you could see the screen and hear, that's exactly where you can ask any questions. While we wait for those questions to come rolling through, Rochelle, I might ask you, so you've been doing this remote communication thing for 5 years with all of those sheroes. What's been hard about it? Is there something that you've had to overcome? Is there something that you've struggled with that people in the session today might be able to learn from?
Oh, I think I've made lots of mistakes along the way. I think one of my biggest mistakes is probably answering a question or something on the run, and your written word can then taken any way that they want to. So I think my biggest lesson from that was, I remember getting off the plane and somewhere, and somebody asked a question. I said, well, I didn't mean it like this, but did you just go into Woolworths, or did you just go in and pick it up? And to that person, it was like, well, why didn't you pick it up? So
Yeah.
it really is about taking your time to respond and to make sure that it's done with the dignity in which it was asked, right? So
Yeah.
that's probably been one of our biggest lessons. If we had, and we've only just now been able to see each other's faces when we're talking to each other, and it's created, IT has created these amazing ways that we have state team leaders. So to have 8 of us together on Sunday once a month, and we just sit around and have wine. We have agendas and so forth, and nothing can ever give you what you get when you all come physically together, but you can't have 6,000, 5,000 volunteers all come together. So you have to try to recreate that in the best way that you can online, and that's trying to get small groups together so that they feel heard.
Yeah. So I've got quite a specific question for you, Rochelle, which is come through about workplace. And so someone has asked for all of your volunteers, and I think you've got almost 6,000, right? Did you set them up as a multi-company and workplace? So this is over my head because I don't use workplace for my internal comm stuff. Do you know the answer to that, or can we come back to that person?
I do, but if I'd like to make it up, I'd say no. I think it's set up as one. And we fall in Workplace for Good, so they helped us set it up. In that setup, I have announcements which everybody can see, and that's the first thing that comes up in their newsfeed. I try not to have more than 3 posts in a week, because I know that people have got their lives and everything that they've got going on. But then there are, groups for New South Wales state. There are groups for each state. Then there are actual regional groups that the team leaders manage.
Awesome. For that specific question, maybe we can try and find out the answer from someone at your organisation. We can email it through to Melissa as well about the specific setup stuff. Thank you. We've definitely got time for a couple more questions if anyone is sitting on one. Ngaire, I might throw to you. You were saying, keep an eye on those brands or those organisations who've been really affected by lockdown. If there was one particular organisation that you think is doing something awesome at the moment, who would you direct people to?
I don't know if I have one specific one. I have many. I think
That's okay.
one of the charities that I think has done a really quite beautiful thing for COVID-19 is Kids Can in New Zealand, who are focused on getting food to children in poverty, and they have launched what looks like a specific appeal that's really about 19 and encourages people to donate $19. I know I certainly did. The other things that are really working specifically, there's a little clue in that Google Trend data around the rules, and that people are really focused on the rules. It's people that are playing by the rules and finding creative ways around it. So it might be being open, but focusing on essential services. It might be changing your production line to make PPE. It might be, I think, the warehouse who in New Zealand had a very rough start to being an essential service because they declared they were one when they weren't, and people were very angry. But today they've donated all of their Easter stock that isn't going to be sold to organisations that provide food parcels and food banks. So there's something in connecting with people, playing by the rules, and making sure, like, having your position clear about whether or not you are an essential service, whether or not you're looking after your staff during this time. Nobody wants to participate in something that looks like it's just trying to make money right now.
Got another couple of questions coming through. Rochelle, I have a feeling this is one you could probably talk on for a really long time, so I'm going to challenge you to answer it in just a couple of minutes. What are the key things to do, or the key things that you do to sustain volunteers' passion and engagement with the work they do for you?
Yeah, that's a fairly easy one. That's telling the stories of the women that we've been able to help. If you keep telling them the stories, and most of those stories you can't cry and tell them, so making sure that you've got the emotion and just sharing those stories and making sure that they know that they made a difference to that woman and to so many others. It's as simple as that. It's keeping them up to date with the stories of the women that we are able to help.
And do you share those stories with video? Do you pass them on? Like what's the best way to share that kind of story?
Yeah, so somebody might write into our Facebook page and I will not even wait till the morning. I will just cry and read it to them and pop that straight into announcements. We always communicate inwards then outwards, so nobody in the public would see that until the Shiros have seen it, because they made that happen. So we try to make sure that anything that we do goes inwards and then out.
Awesome. The question before from Melissa about workplace was, so Melissa's working at Vinnie's, and so she's got a challenge for her onboarding some of her volunteers to workplace as well. So maybe that can be something that we connect up after the session. Absolutely. That could be an awesome sharing opportunity. I've got another question that's come through. Rochelle, would you say the use of emoticons or emoji or smileys help in your virtual comms? What's your take on a smiley?
I don't really have a take on it.
Yeah.
I probably don't use them unless I'm being cheeky, probably, yeah. Yeah, because I don't do a lot of written stuff without the eye-to-eye contact.
Yeah.
They would get those emojis from this whole face anyway.
Yeah. Ngaire, what's your take on an emoji?
Yeah.
I think Rochelle's probably hit the nail on the head a little bit. I mean, a person's face is far more powerful than an emoji. We've spent a lot of time looking at things like emoji analysis. Tricky. People use them in all sorts of contexts, and yeah, can't really replace a human face.
No.
Awesome. Well, I can't see any more questions coming through. If you've got one that is burning, send it through now. And I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. And that's all we've got time for. I'd love you to join us next week. We've got another special guest with us next week, which is Rachel Clements, and she works at the Centre for Corporate Health, and she's been doing some writing around psychosocial risk and how you can look after the mental health and well-being of your teams, specifically in the time of COVID. She's got a really good article on it, which we'll share next week and which she will speak to. So that's what we'll do at 2:30 p.m. Sydney time and 4:30 p.m. New Zealand time on Friday next week. For everybody that's tuned in today, thank you so much for coming along. I know that this is a different kind of long weekend than a lot of us usually have for Easter or Passover or whatever we're celebrating, just some special time with our loved ones. But I really hope that you have a good time. Thank you for joining in, and we'll do another Conversations Through Change on Friday next week. Thank you all for coming along. Thank you, Ngaire, for the insights. Thank you, Rochelle, for everything that you've shared with us today. It's been awesome.
My pleasure.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely long weekend. Thank you. James says thank you in the comments. I was like, is it a question? But it's just a thank you for a great presentation. Thanks, everybody. Bye.